Hi, welcome to Box on the Box Rock and Celluloid, or Bok for short. So I'm going to look at Rush's albums today from 1974 and 1982. I'm not going to carry on after that because I feel like there's a kind of cut-off point with these albums. They form three kind of little trilogies. After 82, they'll do an album every 2 years or even longer. The sound changes and they kind of go back to a sound, but they never really, go back to this era, the way this progresses. So basically it opens up with their first album, so just picking it off the pile there, Rush, self-titled, 1974. So this is a hard rock album. There's no Neil Peart, he's not in the band. So it's basically got kind of more typical rock lyrics by Geddy Lee. The drumming style of John Rusty is more just playing behind the beat, a more Bonham-esque style, I guess. You can hear the Led Zeppelin influence a lot with Geddy Lee's Ooh Yeahs and stuff like that. But what it does have is the interplay between Alex and Geddy. That's starting to kind of form, they've been playing together since 1968. It's really tight. It's pretty well recorded for the time. The production by the band and the engineer, whoever they've chosen, is decent. It's got 8 tracks. So it opens with Finding My Way and finishes with Working Man. I think they're the 2 key tracks off it, and Working Man's like the first classic Rush track. In between that, it's a good hard rock record. You got Need Some Love and Take a Friend, which are catchy. Like Ooh, I Need Some Love, there you go, from Geddy. Here Again, which is a little more epic, 7 minutes and 34, cool guitar solo on that, What You Doing. In the Mood, again a funny lyric, Geddy Lee kind of writing lyrics about his girlfriend, I guess. You've got me in the mood for, you know what. It's just strange, because Geddy Lee's just kind of a geeky guy and you can't imagine him getting all kind of hot under the collar and feeling horny. Before and after. So it just fits in with the cycle. 1974, you got Rock and Roll by Judas Priest. And that's an interesting comparison because I would say Rock and Roll by Judas Priest, I really like the record, but it doesn't sound anything like Judas Priest really, apart from Rob Halford's vocals, whereas this sounds more like Rush. It just hasn't got all the elements in it. And you got Burn, Stormbringer by Deep Purple, Montrose's debut, to name a few. So this album sits perfectly well in with other American hard rock albums of that time. If you bought this album at the time, it wouldn't be as good as some of those classics I mentioned, but there would be enough here for you to go, actually I might check out the next album, which is this, 1975's Fly By Night. Love that cover, lovely Al. So what happens here is 2 key factors happen. Basically, one of the greatest drummers of all time, or eventually joins the band, and one of the greatest lyricists in the history of progressive rock, progressive hard rock, progressive metal, Neil Peart. So he joins the band, which is pretty fucking awesome if you're Rush. And that completes the chemistry and it creates this incredible power trio that will, go through the stratosphere and become beloved over generations. And the other element is Terry Brown, the producer who will produce every album up to including 1982. And I'm not sure they use engineering wise, and Rush co-producer Terry Brown. I think actually Terry Brown engineers it. It says here produced by Rush and Terry Brown. I think the key thing with Terry Brown, what he does, he recognises that Rush play brilliantly, they're brilliant musicians, and he just needs to capture that. So, Neil Peart's drums, he's probably paid attention at the mic really carefully, and they are, tuned, and stays on top of that with the roadies. He makes sure Geddy Lee's bass, the same as Mike correctly. Maybe he's taking a DI, I don't know. And he captures that, and it's got that clank, that Chris Squire clank that / Rickenbacker clank that Geddy Lee loved in the early recordings. And then Alex Lifeson's guitar, he's double tracking, and he makes sure that the guitar part's really tight, and he's obviously made sure that Alex is always checking his tuning, because the tuning is always really good on Rush records. So the track opens with Anthem. I can't remember if the anthem, title anthem, comes from the Ayn Rand novel, sci-fi novel. I think it's from, 1920s and 30s. So a little bit of literary reference there. Some of the lyrics on this album I think probably still holdovers from the pre-Neil Peart era. But Anthem's got mixed time signatures. It's got a kind of 12/8 meter and some cool accents. It's really good. and Alex does something called overdubs like a kind of down down power chord on some bits, and it's that kind of intelligence, they're kind of using extra parts to build the song. It's a great opening. Sorry, just scratching my back there. It's a great opening track, and it's a Rush classic. Next track's Best I Can, 3 minutes and 25. Really good. So this is more like a track off the first album, and this is how these 3 albums will link up. I'm going to do, including the next one. So you can always trace it back to what was the first album was like. They kind of link up. They've got this Zeppelin-y, traditional hard rock influence. Beneath, Between and Behind, not as good this track, but 6 out of 10. Again, only 3 minutes and 1 second. And then side 1 on the original vinyl finishes with their first sort of literary progressive classic, and that's Bytor on the Snow Dog. I loved this one as a kid. This is probably one of the first Rush tracks I got into. It's got a great middle section solo, but there's a bit where it breaks down and it goes into a really quiet bit, very quiet, and it reminds me of Rhyming Ancient Mariner by Iron Maiden, and you can hear where Steve Harris has been very influenced by Geddy Lee and Rush all through his career, but on that track. I like at the end, Geddy shouts out, "Snow Dog is victorious!" It's great. I'm not sure what it's about. I don't know what Bytor and the Snow Dog's about. I haven't researched it, but anyway, again, that's Neil Peart bringing in his lyrical chops. Then Cy Turton was with Fly By Night, again, another really great short track, 3 minutes 21. Again, more like a track that might have on the first album, but with some more delicate guitars, a lot cleaner, less bombast on this track. Cool Neil Peart lyric about going to London in his days before Rush. Track 6 is under 3 minutes. Very few Rush tracks under 3 minutes. Making Memories. This isn't a great track. This doesn't do it for me. Then you got Rivendell, again, another literary reference, Lord of the Rings, where the hobbits live, I think. Beautiful track, really nice. I don't love it, but I like it. And then in the end, another good rocker, kind of 6 out of 10 track. So, this album, it's got 4 really corking tracks and 3 pretty decent ones. I give it a 7 out of 10. I probably don't like it quite as much as when I was younger, but it is it's a good second record. And I think the production and stuff is good. Just one thing I didn't mention, and I just remembered, is on the track on the gaps on Byron and the Snow Dog. There's a bit after the middle section that goes do 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 do, and this is where Rush really start to play with odd time signatures. So they have what happens is a bar of 7, I think, for a couple of cycles, and then knocks off a beat and he goes a bar of 6, and then a bar of 5. I think 7/4, 6/4, 5/4. So this command, or this beginning to command odd meters, odd time signatures, is something that they will use to devastating effect in the future, and will mark out their greatness for me. So the next album is where things come unglued for them. It has its fans. 1975's Caress of Steel. Unfortunately for Rush, their attempt to make 2 great albums in 1975 doesn't come off for me the way it did for Judas Priest and Saxon and other bands. I listened to this again. I've tried getting into this album. I know it has its fans, but it just doesn't quite work. The Fly By Night album, I think it sold about 110,000 copies or more, and this dropped it back down to either 40 or 60,000, and they were in real trouble with a record company, which we'll come to. But it opens with Bastille Day, and then I Think I'm Going Bald. Particularly I Think I'm Going Bald. That's a track could easily go on the first album. I think they wrote that for the Canadian band Max Webster. Kim Michelle, I think he was going bald at the time. Who's Max Webster's leader. I haven't checked out much Max Webster, but they're a cult Canadian band, hard rock band. I think you can get their albums on Rock Candy Remaster. Then you got Lakeside Park. I think that's a place in Ontario where Neil Peart used to like to go. So the album with Bastille's and Still Days a classic track. So you got a classic track and then 2 decent tracks. But for me, the 2 long tracks don't work. But these are really important in the history of the band. So you've got the Necromancer, and this is 12 and a half minutes long, and it's split into 3 movements. And then the Fountain of Lamnef. This is nearly 20 minutes long, and it's split into 6 movements. Now, this idea of taking the 20-minute track and 6 movements, we know will take hold. But I feel the problem is with the Fountain of Lamnef that some sections work, other bits it just doesn't flow as one thing. Yeah. So the album kind of comes unstuck in that way, totally random. The album cover's gold. It was actually supposed to be silver, but there was something wrong with the printing when they did it, and it turned out gold. So that's why the steel looks gold. Yeah, I'd give this album like a 4 or 5. Like I said, I've tried getting into it, but for me it's their weakest album. But it finishes the end of the trilogy from the first album. So my concept here is, tracks like I Think I'm Going Bald, Bastille Day, certainly I Think I'm Going Bald could easily appear on the first Rush album or the second, and he's on this. This takes the literary and progressive elements that are introduced on Fly By Night, particularly with Phantom and Lamneth. That could never appear on the first album, but that type of track will feature on the next. So this is a kind of link album. It comes at the end of a cycle and spins into the next. And what is the next album? It is the album that invents progressive heavy metal. It's not a heavy metal album, it's progressive hard rock. But this is one of the most influential albums of all time, and it's 1976's 2112. I'm actually going to do, actually it may already be out when you see this, I'm not sure, but a classic album inspection on this. So I'll go into more detail on that. So yeah, this is like, for many, this is like the Access album of Rush. So when you first get into Rush, this will probably be the album you've heard, this or Moving Pictures. So what's it like? So basically side one of the first of the album was one long piece of music split into 7 movements, 6 movements. You had the Overture, Temple of Syrinx, Discovery, Presentation, Oracle of Dreams, Soliloquy, and Grand Finale. So the Overture basically is an instrumental piece that features themes from all the other bits of music that are going to appear. Then it goes into the Temples of Syrinx. This is the kind of standalone track you often hear from this section, or maybe people will play the Overture and then go into Temples of Syrinx. So the Temples of Syrinx has got a great gallop on it. Totally like massive vocal by Geddy. Great guitar solo by Alex. I should just say at this point, so Alex Lifeson is kind of like the wild card in Rush. Neil Peart and Geddy Lee, once they start working together, they kind of gel as a rhythm section. Obviously, Geddy and Alex have already gelled, but Alex will kind of fit in the gaps between these guys' tightness, and he'll do more kind of off-the-cuff things, generally on his solos, not on rhythm guitar, he'll be, totally in sync, but his solos kind of have little flurries and cascade over the beat more, is how I would describe it. They're not as structured, it's where things cut loose. Then you got Discovery, which has a guitar being tuned up, and then Alex Lifeson starts using upper triads. These are kind of typically 3-note shapes. In this instance, they're played on the G, B, and high E string over the open D string. So guitarists will know, they're called inversions as well. But these types of shapes are really popularised by Pete Townsend, I think. And the Who's, like, you can hear the influence of, obviously Zeppelin mentioned before, but also the Who. And it's kind of like a little rock opera element to this as well. So they're probably like listening to Tommy and things like that, and Quadrophenia. So that's really cool. And the Grand Finale's got a great sort of Geddy vocal on that. So it's a superb piece of music. I do think they did a better, bigger track later on. Side 2 opened with a passage to Bangkok. That's only 3 minutes 34. Again, it just shows the band's skill at doing a shorter track with a great chorus and a great lyric by Neil Peart. It's all about where you get the best weed in the world. Then the Twilight Zone's next, 3:17. I'm not massive on this track. Then Lessons is really good. That's the kind of forgotten rocker on the album. 3 minutes 50, but it's a really good track. And then it goes into Tears again. I'm not fussed with this. It's a ballad, but it's a bit drippy. And then it finishes with Something for Nothing, which is another really good rocker with a cool lyric and a really great vocal by Geddy. So, this album, it is a classic, but I do think it's flawed. I do think Twilight Zone and Tears let it down. So it's this will be controversial, but my mark out of 10, it's kind of getting 40 out of 60. It's about a 7 out of 10. Okay, and but it is, when it's great, it's great. I prefer the next album. I should say this is the start of a run of classic albums for Rush. They do 5 classic albums, in my opinion, on the trot. And that's very much what happened in this era. Bands just kept putting out classic albums. So next album's 1977's Farewell Kings. Great album cover. So I feel like this opens really strongly. The title track starts with a lovely classical style guitar intro from Alex. I think he had classical guitar lessons when he was a kid. So it's got a lovely baroque sort of medieval feel. Really good track, 5:49. I'm just looking at my notes on this track. You're starting to get the synthesizers coming in here. I think there's a little bit on 2112. They're coming in a bit more on this. But this album has like tubular bells and xylophones and other instrumentation. I should say the production on this is not as punchy as 2112, a little more tinsely, the snare. So I think Terry Brown and Rush are still finding how to kind of capture the sound more. Yeah, that's sort of covering that track. Apologies, just looking at my notes there. So the next track, Xanadu, is based on the poem Kubla Khan by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. So you'll recognise again Iron Maiden have kind of nicked that inspiration. Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, I believe, is by him as well, and Steve Harris, composed that that piece based on that. And again, it's got the quiet middle section I mentioned before. But Xanadu's a superb track, and they're bringing all the instrumentation here. It's got the guitar riff at the start. I think is in 10/8. I'm not sure. It's in an odd time signature though. Absolute classic. Love again Alex using that slightly phased guitar with the major chord, dun, 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 dun. And that's the thing. Alex Lifeson on the first record, he's kind of using power chords more with the odd kind of open chord triad. On this, from now on in and going back to 2112, he's using power chords. He's using open chord with triads, major chords, minor chords, and he starts to use a lot of bar chords as well. He's always been a guitarist who's quite happy to use the full bar chord, as it were, and with what we call a third in it, as opposed to just the straight power chords. Closer to Heart next. God, it's 2 minutes 52. I mean, that's just amazing. It's such a catchy track. It's like a single, and the band managed to accomplish so much with the tune. Absolute classic, and brilliant lyric by Neil. Then Cinderella Man, another really good track. This is one of the album's deep cuts, really good. I feel it comes unstuck with the track Madrigal. This just sounds like an unfinished idea to me. It's only 2:33, sorry. It kind of starts off and then it just kind of gets going and then fades out. It's like they needed something but they haven't decided what to do with it. So that lets the album down. Then you got Cygnus X1, which is 10 minutes 21. So this is their first track that's over 10 minutes. There's just one track. There's no movements or sections on this, although it does have sections. But it opens with a really gnarly bass. It's quite atonal. I like the track. It's a bit unmelodic. Again, it's quite experimental. 8 out of 10 for this album. But again, building on the 2112 of having longer arrangements, more literary references in lyrics and so on. And so 1978, this is one of the all-time great album covers. So it's back to front. 1978, this is the... what's the word I'm looking for? This is their high point for me. This is their best album, I think. And this is the end of this next trilogy cycle, as it were. This is where they totally take the long track idea to its zenith. There's only 4 tracks on this album. So side 1 was Cygnus X1 Book 2, so basically the sequel to the track that finished on Farewell Kings. The production on this is better. It's got more punch. I think that's one of the benefits of this album. I think this is the best sounding record up until this point. Apparently there's a lot of emotional turmoil on this album. It's just very hard to make. I think the band pushed themselves to the absolute limit and it shows. So Cygnus X1 is split into 6 parts. Again, Prelude, Apollo, Dionysus, Armageddon, Cygnus and the Sphere, and they've all got little subtitles. This is a superb piece of music. Unlike the original Cygnus, it flows better. It's more melodic. Unlike the Fountain of Lamnef going back, all the sections work together. And unlike some of the 2112, the sections, the writing of each section is even better, I think. Although 2112's got those, seminal moments, this just flows as a piece of music. And it breaks down, I think, yeah, Cygnus bringer of balance. It kind of breaks down into a really atmospheric bit, and Geddy almost does a spoken word singing, but kind of almost spoken word with kind of explosion sounds in the background. It's really, really effective. And the use of odd time signatures on this, you know, is really starting to come at its fore. The next track is, this was an early track I heard. My brother had Living Legends, the Vertigo compilation, back in the day. Circumstances. This extraordinary song, it's only 3 minutes 40, but the band managed to accomplish so much. The time signatures on this, I think it's got bars of 5/4 for the bridge a couple of times. I could be wrong with that. I've tried counting it. But it's just complex, but kind of really tight. It's got amazing vocal by Geddy on this and great lyrics. Yeah. I just think it's a really classic Rush track. I don't know if I played it live much. Next is another classic, The Trees. This is the lyric where Neil Peart started to get into trouble with the enemy. So there was the Ayn Rand reference with Anthem, and 2112 sort of forgot to say the storyline he later realised was influenced by Ayn Rand. Then The Trees, it was seen as an anti-trade union lyric. The way I see it is the Trees can't agree. It's about negotiating. It's about moving to some kind of centre ground and compromise. Something we don't do at the moment. But it's a great lyric, you know, writing a song about trees but making it, you know, all metaphor, a parable, I guess. But it's brilliant, and then again this track kind of breaks off and really goes on a really cool journey. It's got a brilliant classical guitar style intro with Geddy singing, and then the solo's got a lovely kind of free-form Alex solo. It's a brilliant track. And then finally it finishes with La Villa Strangiato, and this is one of the first songs when I was a kid I used to listen to the guitar solo. So for the uninitiated, the guitar solo is kind of 1 minute 35 of perfection. It's not only Alex Lifeson's greatest guitar solo, it's one of the greatest guitar solos ever. You'd probably regularly find this guitar solo in the top echelons of favourite guitar solos. Basically it breaks down into 7/8 time, the section. It goes very quiet, and then it just starts with some volume swells. And then Alex just starts to build it with kind of staccato-like phrases, breaks, and then he does this thing where he kind of phrases and goes over the beat, and does this, what's the word, you know, like I said before, he goes off on one more, he plays more freeform in a way that the other two don't. It's a brilliant track. You know, YYZ's their more well-known instrumental, probably because it's shorter, but this is absolutely classic. So this is a great record, very challenging album, and that ends, that is the last album they will do whole piece of music on one side of the album. After this they will start to strip things down more. So tracks like The Trees and Circumstances, those types of arrangements will make the body up of the next album. So, and the synthesizers as well, I should just mention the synths come in more on Hemispheres. So the next album is 1980's Permanent Waves. So this was one of the first albums to come out in the month of January in 1980, the year of New Wobbum. So what differs from this, it's got Opens with Spirit of Radio, what you could call a Rush hit single. Spirit of Radio, Free Will, great time, odd time signatures on Free Will. Can I check? Have I got a note of that? Sorry, I'm waffling. I haven't, but it's top. Then it's got Jacob's Ladder. This is really complicated. This uses cycles of odd time signatures. Now let me have a look here at my notes, which are all over the shot. I found them. Sorry, this is really unprofessional, but fuck it. So Jacob's Ladder has a cycle of time signatures 5 4 6 4 4 4 5 4 5 4 5 4 6 4 5 4 5 4 5 4 5 4 3 4. Then 4 4 4 4 6 4 7 4 7 4 7 4 7 4 3 4 3 4 4 4. I looked online, some guy worked that out in some comments. It could be wrong, but basically, you know, again, this is where the band start to use odd time signatures, but they're so seamless. They've kind of mastered the idea that they don't need to be in 4/4. They can have like top grooves in 7 groups of 7 and 5, and they're fond of 6 as well, which isn't odd time signature, but it's more unusual. But they can still groove, still flow the lyrics, still flow the melodies over it. And this track demonstrates it really well. I'm not as into it as the shorter tracks. Entree News next, and that's a really poppy, catchy track. Again, this is the type of track would just never appear on the albums before, I think. You know, you'd have short tracks, but not tracks like this. Spirit of Radio as well, the groove of that, you can hear that in tracks like The Trees and stuff like that. But there's just something about the track, it goes somewhere different, and it's got that weird reggae section, you know, and that's something that will start to rear its head and will take them into the 80s. They got Different Strings, which is a really good kind of anti-war song, I think. Almost ballady, really like it. And then it finishes with Natural Science, 9 minutes and 17. So again, a longer track, but I'll start to do less of these. This is a really good record. It's kind of, because it comes between hemispheres and moving pictures, I wouldn't say it's forgotten about. But I could say it's kind of a classic. There's not a bad track on it. I'd probably get 8 out of 10. The production's sharp on it. And then next, the sound of Permanent Waves, the use of shorter arrangements, of more sort of poppy commercial elements, and synths coming in. They do Moving Pictures, which is their most successful album. I've already done a classic album inspection of this, so if you're interested in that, go over to my EBGT channel, Edward Box Guitar Tuition, and you can have a look at that. I go into more detail. But it's a great sounding record, this. It's probably the best sounding record at that point. It's really precisely recorded. It's got 4 classic tracks which open the album, and then you've got Witch Hunt as well, which is a great deep cut. It's got reggae influence on the Vital Signs, the last track, and The Camera Eye is 10 minutes 58, and that's the last track they will ever do over 10 minutes, I believe. So, that's a cut-off point there. But again, the tracks on this and the sound of this, although there'll always be elements, you would never get these kind of tracks on the albums from the era before this. This basically partners up with Permanent Waves, and the final album of this cycle, which is Signals, and I don't have a copy to hand of this. But the difference with this is it's the last album recorded with Terry Brown. I think the commercial elements that brought in on Permanent Waves and Moving Pictures come more to the fore on this, the reggae influence. But the main thing is the synths now, instead of being in there and getting more prevalent, they kind of start to take over on this. And we'll move Alex Lifeson, not to the background, but just sidestep him a bit. So, I'm not that into this album. I think Subdivisions is great, obviously. Really good, it got a 6/4 feel on it, and superb lyrics, that's great. The second track, The Analog Kid, I'm not as into. Chemistry, Digital Man. Yeah, I don't know, the last 2 tracks, Losing It, that's a really cool lyric, and then Countdown's a great track. I'm just looking at some of the notes again. I will confess I don't know this quite as well. Like, the Weapons, I've got a note here, it's got a Genesis-style solo, so what I mean by that is Alex is starting to use the whammy a lot, and it kind of reminded me of those Genesis tracks like Mama, which comes after this. We lost a delay on and using the whammy bar. The other thing is Alex is starting to use sort of power chord shapes on the guitar with a lot of chorus on, with open strings as well on top, and combining sounds that way. Obviously, and the look of the band at this point, the hair's starting to go short and they're wearing sort of like ties and stuff like that. And it's got that more sort of new wave look. They were influenced by the Police a lot at this point. Got a little note about Analog Kid here, track 3. Track 2, sorry. Alex using more whammy. The keys are very prevalent. Yeah, there's a lot of fade outs on this album as well. Instead of like kind of ending songs and having a top ending, it just kind of fades out. But it brings an end to that cycle, and then from here on in, they will spin off from this record and have synths and more processed sounds throughout their successive albums from here on in. So, don't know how that works, my little waffle there. It's very complicated to do this band. There's an awful lot of music to take in. I don't know if I've totally successfully done that, and I can see it's coming at 30 minutes. Which I didn't want to make it that long, but fuck it, just watch it in 2 parts, come back to it anyway. So, answers on a postcard. Thank you very much, cheers.